Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Economic and Community Development Committee meeting. Today is Monday, September 12th, 2022. I am your chair, Tony Troutner. I am joined to my far left by Councilmember Michaud and then Councilmember Larmer. We've just got a few items on the agenda today, and the first is approval of the agenda. Knowing there are no changes, could I have actually, we'll just move on since there are no changes. And the official business that we need to do to start off this meeting is the approval of minutes from our July 11th, 2022 meeting.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or changes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, thank you. We will pass those minutes unanimously. Next up, we have our 2024 Comprehensive Plan Update, and we have a new long-range planning manager. So I'm going to let Kurt introduce her. Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council. I think you took the words out of my mouth there. I'm very happy and pleased to announce we have a new employee here. Kristen Holdsworth is our new long-range planning manager. She's been with us since September 1, so 12 days. Yeah, and honestly, in the 12 days, we've covered a lot of ground already. She's, about to present here this afternoon, and we just couldn't be pleased to have a new member on our team. Again, you're going to get to hear Kristin here in a few moments. I'd be remiss if I didn't just take a moment to also thank Kayleen, who is in the crowd here today. So Kayleen Nobis basically held the fort down for us. A team of one, for a solid 3 months and a few days in there. Kayleen just moved mountains for us. So we were in the process, I think, just starting to negotiate our comp plan contract, which is not a simple one, really complicated contract. It's going to be coming your way soon. The work that Kayleen did for us, she was either in Matt's office or mine, almost every day on the phone, on the computer, just did a ton of work. And we could not have done what we did this summer here without Kayleen kind of doing that for us. So I just want to say a big kudos to her. And, the committee knows the amount of work that we're doing. And it was unfortunate, but a lot of it landed on her shoulders alone for a division of one. So Kayleen, thank you very much for your work, and that's from the whole department. So thank you. With that, Madam Chair, I'd like to introduce you to Kristen Holdsworth.
All right, welcome. You can join us at the podium and then give us that plan update.
Thank you. Yes. So again, my name is Kristen Holdsworth, and I am thrilled to be part of the city of Kent. I come to you from another city in the Puget Sound region, but I'm originally from Southern California. I've done both long-range policy work as well as current planning, and have a soft spot in my heart for the policy work of setting the table, of really bringing in the community's vision of how we want our city to be for residents and people that visit and work here. And so I love working with the community, and this is the comprehensive plan is really kind of the ground floor of what we're going to be doing to plan for our next 20 years. So I put together just kind of a quick presentation. I know you all have had conversations with Kayleen. She, again, I will say, has been doing a wonderful job when she's caught me up to speed with some of the regional negotiations that have been going on. I've been so impressed with her ability to navigate and bob and weave through all of it. And so she's going to come in a little bit just to explain what we've been doing since 2015. But really starting to lay the groundwork. You may or may not have been heavily involved in the 2015 comprehensive plan update, but generally a comprehensive plan is a vision for the city for the next 20 years. And if done well, it explains who we are as a community, what our goals and aspirations are, and what types of services and amenities we have, as well as those we need. The comp plan is supposed to proactively anticipate the challenges and opportunities and to help shape the way that the city will grow. We are in Washington State, and so we are required to plan under something called the Growth Management Act. It was adopted in the 1990s, and it has 14 overarching goals, and they relate everything from how we are planning and coordinating our development to also ensuring that we are protecting the environment and natural resources. Under GMA, we must plan plan for and accommodate both household and job growth for a 20-year horizon. And we can't dictate necessarily what the free market is going to do. We still are collaborative partners with the free market and with for-profit and nonprofit organizations, but we are required by state law just to make sure that we have that land capacity there, so that as growth happens, we are making sure that our utilities and our schools and all of the infrastructure is keeping up in a coordinated manner. So under the Growth Management Act, there's this inverted triangle of how things are coordinated. So we're required to coordinate at the state level through those 14 policy goals. And then it flows down to the multi-county planning policies, which is done through PSRC. And that's a 4-county region. And then King County makes its own planning policies. So each of them are kind of filtering down and being consistent with the one above it. And then, so we as a city in Kent have coordinated extensively and had negotiations and conversations around what those countywide planning policies have been. And then from those, we have ratified the agreement of those CPPs, and now it's our turn to make the policies that work for Kent. And so we, as long as we are generally consistent with what flows up above, we have great flexibility. And so really part of this process is to work with the community to set the vision and the goals for the next 20 years, and then to have implementation strategies that follow. We also have other things that will flow out of the comprehensive plan and also are helping inform the comprehensive plan. And those are called functional plans, and they could be anything from a transportation management plan to stormwater management, economic development strategies. All of those flow down and are kind of an iterative cycle where we only do big comprehensive plan updates every 8 to 10 years, but in the interim, we're updating those other plans. And so they talk back and forth to each other. And then we have our development regulations, and then projects, which is really where you see on the ground how our vision comes to life. And those projects could be private investments or public investments. So examples would be Kent Station or the Sound Transit Light Rail. Those are all projects that are complying with this entire growth management framework. So a little refresher on what's in our 2015 comprehensive plan. It's about 200 pages and includes about 100 pages of technical information in an appendix. There's 9 elements included. All of them are required except for the human services element. State law does allow for us to have some additional elements if we so choose, and we'll talk about one of the additional optional elements that we've opted to go for in the 2024 update coming forward. We also have sub-area plans, which are more specific planning detail for areas of the city that warrant additional attention due to unique factors. And so we have the Midway, Downtown, and Raleigh the Valley Manufacturing and Industrial Lands Plan. And then PSRC designates centers within the 4-county region, and these are areas that are unique and also of regional importance for housing as well as jobs and growth. And so we have 2 in the city of Kent. The Regional Growth Center is our downtown, which is really planning on more for housing, and then the Manufacturing and Industrial Center is Raleigh the Valley is a part of that, and then Raleigh the Valley covers a broader area as well. And those designated centers are important for the growth strategy, but for Kent specifically, they're also opening up opportunities for potential funding or other opportunities for grants and collaboration. And so as we're doing this process, we're not starting from scratch. We are going to take the 2015 plan. We're going to recognize the work that's happened over the last 30 years of growth management and continue to build and tinker and reiterate. But we also are going to recognize that there's changing conditions. So housing affordability and the types of housing options is an issue that has become increasingly more important and is required by our state legislature to be addressed in a new way that we haven't done before. We also have other requirements and new topics that aren't necessarily requirements, such as equity and displacement and climate change that have become and gained more prevalence with the city. And so we've elected to bring in a grant to help with some of the climate change elements, which are optional, but we're going out ahead and championing that. We also will be doing a new SEPA environmental impact statement that kind of gets in the weeds a little bit, but it's really important for our current planning and for development groups to have some of the certainty around what the development patterns are. And it helps protect the city in terms of liability for future development as well. So it provides a good foundation that future development can also use and reference as needed. And then we envision all of this, I as a planner love to talk about these things, but we know not everyone does. And so our goal is to be as accessible as possible, but to also build on partnerships and build coordinated efforts. And so we know we can't do everything alone, but we also know that the community has some really valuable ideas about the future. They may just not speak in land use and planner languages. And so our goal is to really take what we hear from the community and from other community-based organizations and businesses and faith communities and then translate that into a plan that complies with state requirements, but really reflects what Kent prioritizes. So along those lines of community engagement, we see it as vital to the success of our project, and we look forward to working with a variety of different divisions and departments that have already developed strong relationships with the community, as well as reaching out and establishing new ones. We're committing to an equity lens, focusing on making sure people feel that they're not just invited, but that they feel welcome and included in conversations, that we are respectful in areas where the community may have varying points of opinions or disagreements, and that we're really transparent in what our role as the planners are in terms of what we are doing as serving as a conduit, but ultimately it is the City Council's decision on what the final plan is. And so being transparent on not just hearing information, but filtering it back up to you all, and then being clear on what we've heard as well, and not bearing opinions or putting our own personal filters on them. So we're going to employ a variety of methods to meet the community where they are and manners that they prefer. And so this could be a variety of strategies ranging from online forums to in-person meetings to back-to-school nights to kind of other pop-up events. And so we will be working with our consultants to better identify the strategies to hear from our diverse community. So what's at the root of this 2024 comprehensive plan? And I want to share a little bit of what we've been working on, because even though 2015 may or may, I don't know, with COVID, maybe it seems like a lifetime ago, but a lot has been happening especially at the regional level and the county level to get us to where we are today, which is ready to start our comprehensive planning process. So I'll go ahead and bring up Kayleen to talk about the work that she's been working on, and then I'll round it out, and I'm happy to answer any questions after that.
Thank you.
Hello. So, yes, this might be familiar, but in 2021, the city participated in the Urban Growth Capacity Report, which was formerly known as Buildable Lands. Long story short, this was a very complicated mathematical mapping exercise to examine what development has occurred in the last 10 years since the study, how we zone our land, and how much capacity thus then would be left over to address future growth. The UGC report showed that at the time of reporting, we were on track to meet our 2035 targets. So in 2015, we passed the comprehensive plan that had housing targets for 2035. Had we continued to build at the rate we're building now, we'd be completely fine to meet all of the targets as identified in the 2035 comprehensive plan. As you'll learn, our plans now overlap with each other. It's just kind of the nature of planning. So we'll get into what our new targets are and how those have changed. But this exercise was done concurrently with King County's update to the countywide planning policies, and these calculations for buildable lands were valuable for us to be able to negotiate our final data points when we came to deciding on our new targets. So I came to you in March of this year to ratify the 2022 countywide planning policies. Haley and I were very involved in ensuring that Kent was at the table for all of those, and we're really proud of changing some of the policies specifically that were related to an antiquated way of how we used to look at industrial lands to reflect policies that were more in accordance with Rally the Valley. And none of the policies in the countywide planning policies are in direct opposition to anything that we wanted either, so we kind of consider it a win. We should consider it a win anyway. But as part of the CPPs, the development pattern section is the section that identifies what our housing and growth targets are. So that's probably the one that's the most interesting. So just a quick reminder of what our growth targets. These were collaborative and kind of a trading back and forth between us and other cities in the King County region. And they're for the next 20 years in the urban area only. After back and forth with other cities and a strongly worded letter from the city of Kent, we were able to reduce our housing target a little bit to get it to what we believed was a more manageable target, but is still in fact a target. Something that we'll have to address in our comprehensive plan on how we will meet those new targets. So speaking of the new targets, this is a considerable increase of the rate of development for us for both housing units and new jobs. It would necessitate us to grow at a slightly increased pace of housing units per year than we have in the previous years, but we're at around 300 to 350 units per year, so it's marginal per year, but it is growth. Part of the comprehensive plan update will have us looking at what are our existing policies and how can we navigate these updated targets to make sure that we can meet them for our 2044 target, or 2044 comprehensive plan update. So that's actually all I have for you, and I'll give it back to Kristin.
So that sets the stage of what we've been doing at the regional and county level to kind of get us to where we're at today. There are some new legislative requirements which have kind of blown the lid off of how we've traditionally planned. And so HB 1220 was adopted by the state legislature in 2021, and it has some unique requirements for our housing element update. And so traditionally planning in Washington, we've only had to make sure that the capacity is there. And so whether those units were for workforce housing or whether they were for market rate or deeply subsidized didn't really matter as long as we had that target number available. HB 1220 changes this to make sure not just that we have capacity in the land for the number of units, but that we're also looking at providing different levels of affordability. And so you'll often hear in our future conversations AMI or area median income. And so we're looking at different bands of area median income, and Commerce right now is working to develop what that methodology should be. So Kent historically has had a lot more workforce housing than other neighboring cities. And so there's a lot of conversations happening right now at the King County Growth Management Planning Council of how do we move forward to address the cities that have not historically had as much affordable housing, so that it's not just continuing to push people into areas that already have affordable housing, but it provides opportunity across the board. And so we have been participating. I have had 2 meetings already on this topic in 12 days, but we are tracking it closely and really working to work with King County as well as SCIP to advocate for the distribution for Kent. And so there will be more conversations at the end of September, and we are continuing to monitor this as well. Other requirements for this legislation, so we will have to include strategies for achieving those levels of affordability. We also are supposed to start planning for moderate density, sometimes called missing middle housing, which is basically the range from when you have a single family to a larger 5/2 complex. There's other housing types that can be really significant for home ownership opportunities as well as for family configurations or multifamily configurations. And so looking at things like duplexes, fourplexes, townhomes are all things that we will be considering of where would they belong in the city of Kent in terms, and where are they likely to be areas for redevelopment. And then other elements are looking at historically single family zones have had a history of producing racially disparate impacts and excluding certain communities from levels of ownership. And so looking at those displacement challenges as well as the historic challenges of our zoning patterns and identifying ways to mitigate those impacts is also a part of this state requirement. And so we will have our work cut out for us, especially in the housing section of our housing element, and that will be largely in tandem with what we're doing with the rest of our land use development patterns as well. Other emerging trends, so we talked about housing options and affordability. Equity is another one, and that's everything from how the plan is made so that we're including community voices, but also thinking about other strategies that we can include to provide access and opportunity for our community. Displacement is a challenge, not just for housing, but also for cultural centers and economic opportunities, and so that's another strategy that will, or a challenge that we'll be looking to address through this plan is what can we as a city do to combat displacement, and where do we need to also have partnerships with other county or regional entities to help provide services and other opportunities. And then the last one, which I'm really excited about, is our optional climate change element. So I hinted at this earlier, but there was previously state legislation that did not pass that was going to require a climate change element. Instead, the legislature made some negotiations and said, well, if you choose to do this, it's optional, but we will provide grant funding for it. And so we have partnered, we're part of the K4C group, and so we'll be getting a greenhouse gas inventory, but we are also electing to do more and include it actually in our comprehensive plan for the future. And so I'm sure there will be many more conversations about what that entails. I know the growth management framework in and of itself is a great climate strategy, and so figuring out what else we'll want to pursue with the Kent lens will be something that we'll be coming back to you with. So really the point today was just to say hi, let you know that I somewhat know what I'm talking about and understand comprehensive planning, and to let you know what's coming up. So on September 20th, we'll be bringing that comprehensive plan contract. It is a big amount of work, or a big lift for staff to do on their own, and so bringing in a consultant firm that's a little bit more nimble with their expertise is going to be a huge asset for us as a city. So Kayleen and I both will be full-time plus getting the rest of the work done, but having some of those expertise will be really important. So the contract will be before you on September 20th. We also are applying for another commerce grant to help offset some of the costs of that contract, and that's due September 30th. It is a straight allocation, so I will brag that we're going to receive it, even though it is called a grant. So we're excited about that. It'll cover over half of the contract amount. And then ongoing, we are monitoring these conversations and weighing in with the GMPC at King County, and then we are excited to, once we have the consultant on board, to do a launch and kickoff of the comp plan. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have now, or if you have anything top of mind that you want to make sure that we're thinking about as we're doing our kickoff meetings, I'm happy to receive that feedback as well.
Well, first of all, welcome. 12 days, you've done a lot. I feel like you've done your homework and you've kind of hit the ground running, because you're very knowledgeable, and I know that the team is very lucky to have you. So welcome.
Thank you.
I want to turn to my colleagues, see if anyone has any questions or comments.
No, I just want to echo, super impressed with the presentation and your knowledge, and looking forward to what you guys bring forward.
Thank you.
And Kayleen, thank you for all your hard work. I know you two will continue to work together, and she has a great mentor in you. So she is. She's amazing. But thank you for what you've done this past year and a half to make sure we're kept up to speed too. So wonderful. Well, we have your information, and I know we'll be hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have our 2022 permitting activity, and I think, Matt, you're ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready to go. Thanks. Good evening, committee members. I last spoke with this committee in June of 2019 regarding permitting. It's something that we try to update the council and the committee on regularly, but you know, we had a hiccup in the middle there. So I want to get back to this topic. Yeah, exactly. I think we spoke maybe occasionally about some of the challenges we were facing mostly through our asks for TLT staff. As you remember, we did lose a few folks there at the beginning of the pandemic, but we quickly realized that our activity was coming back and we needed people. And so I'll say thanks for supporting our restaffing at that time. It's really made a difference, and I'll get into a little bit of that. What I really want to focus on tonight is talk to you about where we're at kind of historically with our permitting volumes, but I want to focus on some of the new challenges that we've faced. Kent has historically been a build out of an industrial valley and suburban hills, more or less. But we've had some really amazing new investments in the city that have really brought new challenges. And as, of course, technology changes and the world around us changes, it does offer some new challenges. So I want to get into that and how it's affecting us. First, I'll just refresh you quickly. What's the day in the life of your average permitting staff? These are the folks that are doing the production. Of course, we have administrative folks. We have our long-range staff that you just heard from. So this isn't really covering the whole department, but I think this is the meat of what the public sees in terms of production. So we process about 5,000 permit applications a year. That's folks that are touching the administrative side, that are the building, planning, engineering, and fire reviewers. 5,000 is a lot, and it got to be a lot more work during the pandemic because we went paperless, and paperless sounds like it would be less work. It's actually a lot more. So that slowed us down, but we've addressed that largely. We have field inspectors, 5 in our building department, who do about 20,000 inspections a year. I didn't realize it was that high till I pulled the report. That's really amazing. That crew does very good work. And then our public counter, all of our review staff is available to the public every day, and we don't have an exact number, but I know it's hundreds of questions. A lot of them are just cold calls coming into the city. A lot of them are follow-up on projects. The phone rings and rings and rings, so we're glad people are communicating with us. So here's the boring number. It's not boring to me, but it's a boring graph, I guess, but it shows. I went back to 2013 to look at actually went back to 12. It didn't show. I took about a 10-year average. So our permitting really peaked around 2017 or 2018. With the housing as it was kind of churning along, and then we hit COVID. You see that, but it wasn't as big a drop as I really, historically, until I prepared this graph, I didn't realize that it was kind of an anomaly. And then we came back, and I projected out for this year that we'd do about 4,800 permits this year, which is just above that 10-year average. So we're plugging along with about the same staff we've always had. So 5 building reviewers, 4 planners, civil engineering, and 6 permit techs. That's 2 more than our norm, and that reflects the additional staff that was added in the mid-biennium adjustment during the pandemic. We asked for those positions because I was talking about the paperless permitting required a lot more touches from the staff, and we saw a bottleneck there. That bottleneck was resulting in months of delay being added to the permit process that was reduced to just a couple of weeks when everyone kind of got fully online. So we learned in this case that additional staff added to those bottleneck areas resulted in improvements. So we were happy about that. Now I want to talk a bit about the sort of nature of some interesting new types of projects that, in my career, 20 years with the city, are somewhat unique, or they're becoming certainly more frequent. One of those is what I call vertical residential. It's kind of a new field in the building code that our folks have had to become familiar with, our inspectors have had to become familiar with, and really it's exciting because it's fleshing out the vision for our downtown. Most of these are downtown, as you know. During the pandemic, we've had 5 projects that have either been completed or started or are in the planning process. That there's 1,200 market rate units, 218 affordable senior units. So you're familiar with the Meet Me on Meeker kind of success with Ethos in Midtown. Madison Plaza, the one pictured, you see that. That's pretty prominent kind of in our downtown area right now. Ovation I think the crane is still up at Ovation behind the Key Bank downtown. And Pros at Kent Station. It's a little removed from Kent Station, but that's what they've named it. It's just south of the Ford dealership off Central Avenue. And that's in the permitting stages right now. And I think that's 202 or 300 units. It's a pretty significant project there off Novak Lane. So those require intensive civil review. Of course, they generate a lot of impact fees and all that, but they're also kind of a challenge for our inspectors and building reviewers to look at a new type of construction. Sound Transit Link Light Rail, this is in 2019, I called this the elephant in the room because we knew it was going to take a lot of staff resources to work with the contractors and Sound Transit to, permit and review this once in a lifetime project. And it's really kind of played out the way we thought. The way that project is structured, they call it design build, which is a nice way of saying that they're going to design it as they go. And so they'll come up, they have an overall design that they usually end up changing. It's very iterative. So we've, just to kind of put it in context of our other permits, we've asked them for permit applications. They've had 238, but they're designed to be reworked over and over and over. And we've committed to linking arms with them and participating, going along with that. So it's a high staff demand project. Of course, we think it's worth it because it's a wonderful investment in the city, but it's not free on our end at all. It does impact it does impact our productivity because it calls on our plan reviewers and our inspectors to be very engaged on an ongoing basis. So we're looking forward to that being completed. In a similar vein, the Metro's Rapid Ride I-Line project, maybe it's not as obvious, not as visible as light rail, but it's certainly also an important investment that will, I think, bring a real great amenity to our East Hill. This will connect Renton, Kent, and Auburn kind of to the 405 corridor. It's Rapid Ride. They're asking for more lanes so that these buses can have priority and meet their timetables. So there's multiple construction locations. They're talking to ECD staff, who's also working with Public Works staff, to make sure that all of these sites are safe, that the lanes are correctly aligned, and that the property owners who are adjacent to these are not unduly affected by, when parking lots get shrunk or landscape areas get taken away. All of those right-of-way dedication requirements and reconfigured driveways do have an impact. So that's really a big project for us. And we're working closely with the Metro staff and Public Works as well. So again, big investment in Kent, but it's not free to us. This is a fun one. I think you've heard a lot about 5G cellular. The council passed some design standards for this equipment. This is something that the cell industry has been very active in. They actually lobbied the federal government to get rules that limit the city's ability to charge fees for their permits and institute timeline requirements that are not local, they're federal. So we have what's called a shot clock every time they give us a permit application. We have a very limited amount of time to turn it around or put it on hold or whatever. So this is very demanding of our time, especially because there are currently over, I think it's 150-ish locations. It's changing every day in the city that have been proposed for small cells, but we know that's going to just grow and grow and grow and grow. And every time one of these facilities is installed, there's also a power requirement. So there's permitting and permitting and permitting. There's cuts in the roads. There's cuts in the dishes. There's lots of new infrastructure that needs to be put in place that will keep us busy. So it's a new technology. There's new players, and they keep a few of our staff members very busy. I threw this in because it's not swamping us by any stretch, but it is new, and I thought you all might be interested to know that we know this is a thing, but in Kent, we've seen, there's 40 permitted locations for residential solar in Kent. That was just kind of loping along 5 one year, 8 another year. And then in 2022, we've seen 25 applications, just 8 months of this year. We don't know exactly why, but I was looking at some of the new federal tax write-off requirements or allowances that allow about 30% of a residential solar install project to be written off of a person's taxes. So we could speculate that has something to do with the increased popularity, but it's pretty cool. So I'll just go through a few of the adjustments that we made during the pandemic. We could call them pandemic era changes, but they're going to stay with us because our major response was to go paperless. That's not changing. as well as hybrid work schedules that introduces some challenges. I think we've been very successful in managing those in ECD, though. We've had to adjust our public hours, or our hours for our public counter. We were shutting down quite a bit during the pandemic. Obviously, we were closed entirely. We'd made some adjustments before to try to give our permit staff time to catch up. Now that we've caught up, we've worked with our friends over in public finance, customer service, and we've agreed that 9 to 4, Monday through Friday, we're now open to the public. So I think that's a nice way to become more available and serve the public. Like I said, the permit center staff has really came out of the pandemic, and that's been a real help. I threw a couple slides in here because we do have the council adopted performance dashboard. This is actually hard data to attain. It's not easy to run. We're trying to figure out ways to make it happen more easily. And gosh, I'm sorry for the low quality of the slide, but the red horizontal line that you see is our goal. That is about 60. Can anyone see that better than I can? It's 70.1 days? Oh, okay. That's our goal. So we don't know exactly where we are today, but we know that the staffing that we added in the permit center knocked a lot of days off of that. So when we rerun this, we expect to see some improved numbers there. And I think we're planning on rerunning those annually. So I showed you residential before, this is commercial, and if you spend a lot of time staring at that, we're trying to show the city time, the applicant time, because applicants always also contribute to those timelines, and then the overall time that permits are going out the door. So we picked a number for our target and recommended that to the council that represents our pre-COVID average. So that's what we're shooting for, and we're continuing to look for ways to get to that. So that's all I have for you this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, very interesting, because I know a lot goes on, but it's kind of nice every once in a while to just see the slides to show, we know there's a lot of permitting going on the West Hill with the light rail, but, you don't think about the cell towers, and you don't think about Rapid Ride and all of those things that take time and take people in your department to take care of. So
there's a lot that's unseen. There's long lead-ins and there's long tails to these things.
Yep, so it's a great reminder of all the different things that you guys get done in there. Any questions or comments?
I have a few, actually.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Larmer.
Okay, so the paperless process is creating more time for staff. Did you say that that's been resolved? Was that a temporary situation as we move to that system, or do we continue to see it taking more staff time?
It takes more staff time.
Okay.
We anticipate eventually that there'll be some technological kind of automations that will help, but at this point, the old way of bringing a permit set into the office was a big roll of paper and transposing some key information into the tracking system. Now that's required, but we use a product called Bluebeam, which is very common in the construction industry for reviewing and marking up plans, but that requires it's basically file setup. It's creating sort of they call it a session where all of these plans can be located so that they can be shared. Whereas before we would have asked for 5 sets of a big roll of plans and would have physically carried them to different folks' desks. Now it has to be a shared kind of, it's sort of a web-based access point, which just means that it's a lot more clicks, basically.
So it's a lot more work on our part. Is it less work on the developer's part? Is that the advantage of it?
Yeah.
Okay, and it makes us competitive with everybody else around us as paperless. Okay.
And we chalk it up as one of our kind of greening moves because it saves a ton of vehicle trips. You think about someone hauling dead trees down to us to review plans and making at least 3 visits.
Yeah.
Once to drop off, usually once to, maybe there's a resubmittal or 2, and then there's the final pickup. To do that in a Ford F-150 is just, now, I think it's a good investment. It does take some more upfront on our part. It is a lot more time.
If everybody else around us is doing it too, it's not creating a delay on our part, because everybody else's staff has the same.
Yeah, and there's various kind of iterations of it, but online permitting is common and is expected now. And so then the question becomes, how efficiently can a jurisdiction do that work? And so I think we've got some technology on the horizon that will help that. In fact, we've started to use it. And as that expands, I think it will require less and less kind of click work.
Okay, great. And then my other question was on the affordable, on the new units slide, there was 218 units of affordable senior housing. I'm just curious where is that in a specific, is that across the different projects or a specific one?
That's one. It's called Ovation.
So that was
right
Ovation.
Behind the Key Bank. It's a, gosh, I just keep going past it. It's a senior, age-restricted, affordable project.
Great. I just wanted to clarify which one that was. That was all I had for questions.
Right,
Thank
wonderful. And Councilmember Basho, thank you.
Great presentation, Matt. I'm wondering if the number of complaints about processing time have gone down since the online system.
I hear a lot fewer of them. What about you?
Yeah, I haven't heard any in a while.
That's my barometer. How often do I get the emails or how often do I get the phone calls? They've gone down. I think our process is a lot more transparent. In addition to adding 2 permit techs, we've also added someone who answers the phones. Just if the phone doesn't get picked up on the main line, a lot of people will start dialing up the phone tree, as it were. That's when I hear it. Maybe that's when you hear it. Maybe it's when the mayor's office hears it. So that's happening a lot less than it was during the pandemic. So I don't track everyone, but I know from my kind of emotional meter that it's much lower. So we address those as they come up, and we do get calls from people saying, hey, I'm in a bind with my project. I really need to know where this is at. So we do a lot of kind of daylighting of status and things like that. And if we can help move things along in a time, at key points in a project to keep projects moving, then we do that. So it's pretty manual right now. So we expect that to get easier and easier.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And that brings us to the last item on our agenda today. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We are adjourned.